Listeners, my guest today took the helm of an Am Law 100 firm at the age of 38 and has remained the CEO for the last 12 years. Get ready to take note as Howard and I asked Noah questions about his leadership journey and his relational superpowers that have helped strengthen the firm's culture and expanded the firm's footprint during his tenure. Enjoy. All right, welcome Noah to the Future is Bright podcast. It's great to have you on the show today.
So nice to be here. Appreciate it.
So Noah, really appreciate you carving out some time with us. I know you've got a very busy schedule. I'd love for you to share just briefly a quick bio on yourself.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO at Katten Muchin Rosenman. I've been in this role now for almost 12 years. I've been at Katten for 16 years. And before that, I had a vibrant practice in the distressed debt trading markets. And really have found it a great pleasure and honor to be in a leadership role for this time at such a great firm.
That's excellent. And Noah, when did you become CEO? How did that start? Was that part of your thought process when you became an attorney?
Never part of my thought process when I became an attorney. The opportunity arose back in 2013 when our law firm, faced with a succession of leadership moment, made the forward-thinking decision of moving from a one-leader model to a two-leader model. And so this opportunity for me to step into the role was a role that had not been created at this firm before me. And at that moment, the firm was particularly focused on diversifying geographical leadership. We're a Chicago-started firm, and the firm felt it really important to get a different perspective from a different city, particularly New York. And we, when we were looking to open the position up to somebody from a younger generation than had historically taken these roles, the firm recognizing that the experience curve and the learning curve on this is so great, and that to have somebody who was younger than most law firm leaders in a position with a 20-plus year forward time horizon was really well aligned with how the firm ought to be thinking about navigating what's only become an accelerating, changing environment.
And without putting you too much on the spot, do you recall where the firm was during 2013 to where you guys are today?
I would. So between then and now, we've grown slightly. Mm-hmm. We've certainly have opened new offices. We weren't in Dallas. We've been in Dallas now for more than 5 years. We were a little bit smaller, and we were a lot less focused. I think that in the 11-ish years I've been sitting in this seat, we've really gotten comfortable recognizing that one of the key strengths of the firm is finance and the financial services industry broadly. Prior to us getting comfortable with that, we do have plenty of great practices outside of that industry. And so it was, who are we? How do we want to differentiate ourselves? How do we want to be known? And getting comfortable, not necessarily having every really valuable attorney feeling like they are in that soundbite, was probably one of the more important things just in terms of the organization, the brand, and how we present ourselves to the world. But a lot has changed in the last 11 or 12 years, and I'm happy to talk about any of it.
And no, what's been the biggest surprise about being CEO for that length of time? I mean, that's not something that obviously you kind of trained for originally. Mm-hmm. Leading an organization of the size of Katten, like what's been happening in the background?
Well, so I mean, I can answer that question in a lot of different ways. The place my brain went first is the thing that surprised me more than anything else, at the beginning at least, was a complete lack of trustworthy feedback. So when I was representing clients and doing their deals, if it went well, I got kudos for that. If it went sideways, I was living with the stress. But day to day, I knew where I stood. Right? You pivot into a leadership role, right? At a firm where you're basically the last word on how much people make, whether people get promoted, who in their group, and how much resource we give to people. People tell you, or at least there's a sense that people are going to tell you what they think you want to hear. And it took me a number of years just getting comfortable with the lack of regular feedback and the fact that I had to find for myself a sense of satisfaction with my job. I wasn't going to get it from the sources that I was accustomed to get it from.
So do you find yourself always asking people like, how's it going? And give me, just kind of more transparency about, what's happening in terms of the culture of the firm? Is that part of your role?
Yeah, I think that for me at least, right, there are people who step into a role like this and say, oh my God, it's my personal relationships that I had beforehand, or I need to put up a wall on my ability to either continue personal relationships with my partners or to create new relationships with my partners. But that's just never been an approach for me. And so from the very outset, one of the things that I started to do and was some of the best advice that I got at the time was, build a cabinet of people who you can trust to tell you honestly what people, what they individually think about what's going on, but also they have, their finger on the pulse and they can bring things to me, right? And that I'm not threatened by that. I welcome that. And so for me, it's been a recognition that the power of my relationships is something that I should utilize as opposed to be afraid of. And it, in many ways, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more, in many ways, the job is harder because I've got to navigate personal relationship, professional relationship, and everything else. But I don't think I could do it any other way. And so, that there's a number of places that we could talk about where I almost was forced to do things my way. Because the one thing that I will say that also was a little bit of a surprise to me was how much in my mind, at least during the first half of my doing this, I was really focused on what do I think they want me to do? Especially as a relatively young person in the role, that was always my thought process.
And how young? I'd love for you to share because I think that's a wonderful soundbite.
How young was I when I first started? Yeah, I was 38 years old at the time when I first started. I did have the luxury at the time of being paired up with our former national managing partner and our first chairman under the new roles that we had, Vince Sergi, who did a really nice job at helping to teach me and being a tremendous resource for me. But to be 38 years old, at that time, I believe one of the youngest equity partners at Katten, and also I believe the youngest person in a leadership role in the AmLaw 100 was, would have been a little bit more intimidating if I actually stopped and thought about it too much. But at the time, I just figured, you know what? Seems like in this society, everybody just wants to be young. I'm young. I'm not going to wish these days away, and I'm going to wind up, making the most of this amazing opportunity at a young age. But I was young.
And how did that evolve for you? So from what you had shared, and I appreciate your vulnerability of saying, what do they want me to do, or what do they want me to say? How did you get to that place where you began leading, I guess, from instinct or from what you realized what you felt was right?
So I would say that the pivotal moment in the evolution of that thought process was the pandemic.
Okay.
Right, here you are, right, in your house using a platform like Zoom that I didn't even know existed beforehand.
Yeah.
Navigating the uncertainties of that moment, which at that time, it's almost hard to remember this, but the minute the pandemic took hold and everybody was stuck in their houses and we were all scared that we couldn't touch our mail, immediately my biggest fear turned into what happens if the economy really goes off a cliff here, and what happens if our clients are unable or unwilling to pay us especially at the earliest stages of the year, really like starting to appreciate our cash flow in ways that I never really had to even think about. And then, when my brain went to that pattern of thinking, which was, okay, well, what do they want me to do? Obviously, they've never been in a pandemic. I've never been in a pandemic, and nobody alive, to my knowledge, really had been in a pandemic. And so it allowed me to wind up just completely realizing that they don't know, which then became a really liberating thing within the next year or two upon reflection. But it is, I mean, especially when you're in the position that I was in from the moment I got this role, sitting across the table from people who are very experienced senior lawyers with tremendous reputations and also big egos, it was very easy to find myself in that pattern of thought, which was, what do they want me to do?
Yeah.
The reality is they gave me this opportunity because they trusted my judgment.
I'm curious, what outside influences affected your evolution or your coming of leadership style? Family, other role models, other dynamics in your life that influenced you? Curious.
Well, I think I'm number one. I even my decision to come to Katten when I lateraled, was something that was informed really well by my father-in-law, who is still a practicing attorney in the city and has been in a lot of positions. In terms of my willingness to take on this role, I think that I had tremendous support from my wife, and also tremendous support from really good friends of mine who have really always just helped guide me to the right place. For example, some of my closest friends when I was junior in Michigan even put the idea of going to law school in my mind where it really wasn't in my mind, and I actually went to law school not necessarily intending to be a lawyer, certainly not intending to be a partner. And what was interesting about that was when this opportunity came along, it kind of triggered in my mind a little bit that journey and the fact that I like stepping out and being a leader is something that actually feels much more natural to me than practicing law.
Was there anything in part of your law school experience, Noah, that, again, when you're an advisor, it's a different set of skills than being obviously a leader and leading an organization? Was there anything that was in the law firm curriculum that you said, I could really kind of, hold on to that, and that really helped me in terms of my leadership kind of capabilities?
I wish. For me, the thing I can spend, and I knew this even when I was in law school, the thing I can spend hours and hours analyzing are individuals, what makes them tick, how to motivate them, and how to communicate with them. I can think about those things, and my attention span is limitless when it comes to that. In terms of the substance of law and in terms of the practice of law, I found it like a real challenge to wind up engaging with either the specificity in documents, the thoroughness required, and so even my practice that I wound up finding a little bit circuitously was a practice that was really more of a trader mindset. I represented hedge funds and investment banks who were buying and selling distressed loans, and it was really more of a service type of a role than it was necessarily like high level legal analysis. And so, Howard, I would say that the thing that carried through really well between my practice and leadership was my ability to appreciate the importance of expectations, the importance of meeting and exceeding expectations, and also my ability to reasonably affect those expectations wherever I could. So, it's fascinating because I consider myself, sitting here in this office at Katten in New York, my clients are my partners. From time to time, it's incumbent upon me to bring things to their attention, to motivate them in a certain way, to communicate with them. but the skills that I actually utilized when I became a partner at a firm and had client relationships, and then these leadership skills, they're actually relatively similar as far as I'm concerned. But I think that the interesting question is how did I get move up the chain when substantive understanding of law and substantive practice of law, was the most important, which was, as an associate at the law firm. And I think that the answer to that is the practice that I was in kind of suited me extraordinarily well.
And that's a great segue into something I think that I'd love for you to share, which is, Noah, what is your leadership style? How do people know Noah Heller at Katten?
So one of the best compliments that I've been paid, we have a compensation system for our leaders that involves partners interviewing the leaders within the firm, the people who run practices, the people who are on our board of directors, and then utilizing that feedback to come up with the appropriate message for me, which is, again, back to the lack of feedback. This is an amazing thing that we've created for ourselves. And one of the things that they told me during my latest session back in the spring was, we spoke to 50 people. They all estimate that they have access to you 3 to 5% of the time at least. And that's only 50 people. But when we do the math, right, we recognize that even though you're creating the perception that I'm so available and I care so much about my partners that I create a real, and it's not it's not fake, it's real. It's a real perception that I'm there, I'm available, and when they need me, they can reach out. And so the fact that so many people feel that they have so much of my attention, really, and my caring is I think just really humbling for me, because that I try to do this job the way I try to live my life, if that resonates. I don't put on a different outfit, or a different persona, the way that I lead this firm than the way that I conduct myself in life.
I've heard it of you that you really value relationship, and that there's an ability for you to have quality relationships. What does that mean in your words? What does that mean?
So it's really important for me to connect with people. I'm not actually somebody who enjoys very much the art of small talk. Like to me that isn't connecting. What is connecting is really understanding what motivates this person. What do they care the most about? Where do they come from? What's their background? And so it winds up being a really great fit at Katten. And the reason why I say it's a really great fit at Katten is because we consider ourselves to be a relationship-driven firm. The firm is now 50 years old, right? We aren't blessed with multi-generational institutional clients, though we constantly try to institutionalize our clients and make sure that they have tons of touch points. And so for our partners, relationships with clients are vitally important. And so because that's the case, I think that they really value someone who appreciates the relationship with them. Is that helpful to you?
It is. Thank you.
No, how do you disconnect from being kind of on call 24/7 with the population that you have and the intensity of the leadership role? How do you do
And
that?
how large is the firm? Can you just define what you're managing? Yeah.
So managing 650 lawyers,
Okay.
125 equity partners, almost 300 partners.
And total size of the firm, staff, and everything else?
1,200 people.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's amazing, because I within this small universe, I'm somebody who everybody recognizes, and it's such a privilege to be able to walk around the halls of my firm and connect with people, and frankly, the one thing that I feel like is really important to me, and I'll get to your question, Howard, is everyone deserves to feel like they matter. Everybody deserves to feel like they're here, and I feel like that doesn't always translate at a firm. And so I'll tell you what I do. I mean, unless there's a pending crisis, I'm usually putting my phone down at 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. I don't sleep with my phone next to me. I wake up in the morning, and almost every day I exercise. I'm on my phone before that. I'm responding to emails. I'm connecting with people. So it's always been for me, even back in the day where I was holding this blue BlackBerry on the beach one time. I could just remember just responsiveness is something that matters to people.
Yeah.
And responsiveness was something that I always felt like I could easily excel at. And so, but I do also recognize the impact of being always available on anxiety and mental health and everything else. And so I do my best, but it's certainly to the extent that I struggle with any mental illness, I struggle with anxiety, right? And I think that I've had to learn over time that it's okay for me to not always respond immediately.
Yeah.
And Noah, are you at the stage of your career now that you're beginning to mentor kind of younger people in the organization now that you've been in the role for 12 years?
For sure. I would say that the analogy that I like the most about my role is I've never been on a football team, but I met like the head coach, right, is actually a coach who's leading other coaches, right? And for me, the thing that I felt like I needed to do and the way that I need to lead is being a resource to the leaders who are in touch on a day-to-day basis, communicating with them, being a resource to bounce ideas off of, to the extent that we wind up, coming up with a plan, and the plan doesn't work, they know I have their back, right? The accountability from my perspective comes from them not following through on what we agreed that they were going to follow through on, not whether it works or doesn't work. And so that head coach analogy has always been something that was really comfortable for me. But I would imagine that there are plenty of head coaches of football teams who really do enjoy like getting down to the nuts and bolts with some of their players. And so for me, one of the things I enjoy doing the most is mentoring our lawyers at the firm. And I have both formal and informal relationships with a couple of associates and a handful of partners who I meet with or am available to every month, if not more often. And that is that the balance, having that, being that, having those relationships, seeing that conversations with me can help people get more confident in their own leadership ability, their own supervision of lawyers, their own development as lawyers. Like to me, that it balances some of the stress and uncertainty out in a big way.
I'm curious if you played sports at any time in your younger career or at school, because usually those traits kind of follow on to when you're kind of in a professional capacity.
So you can't tell this on a podcast, but I'm 6'6", and you also can't tell this on a podcast, but I'm one of the worst naturally ungifted athletes that you could find. That being said, I love and always have loved watching sports, attending sports, talking about sports. And I remember in college, a bunch of my friends were reading. Phil Jackson wrote this book about teamwork. And like, so there's so many analogies, I think, for just, because again, I'm the leader here. I also like just being a team player in other environments.
Mm-hmm.
And so that aspect of like what it means to be on a team and fill a role and all of that informs greatly just the way I lead, but more importantly, the way I treat people.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I think that probably one of the things that the thing that I'm the most proud of that's evolved in the time that I've been in this role is I think that the way people are treated within these four walls has evolved over time, and to me that is really, really important. So sports are very important to me, but not from having played them.
Understood.
And Noah, knowing that you've been in the role for 12 years, would love to hear your thoughts about succession planning. What does that look like? And maybe even some advice for other law firm executives thinking the same thing.
So are when you say succession planning, I mean, to me, there's a couple of different aspects, right? One is the succession planning of client relationships and other things from senior lawyers, which I'll talk about for 1 second, is really important. And from, we speak to clients regularly at the leadership levels, and we know that those clients, they're responsible for succession planning internally, and they expect us to have a deep bench with other relationships. But for me, I view one of the most important things that I need to do is to make it so that there are a number of people who are visible, known to partners, have real world experience navigating issues like the ones that I navigate in this chair, that could and would step into the role. And that's a challenge, and the reason why that's a challenge. So, I spoke earlier about the first chair that I worked with, a man named Vince Sergi. He was in the role for over 20 years. And at a law firm, when you're in a role for a really long time, people, the line between you and the role starts to get really blurry, and it becomes very challenging for people to imagine somebody else in that role because everybody has different characteristics. And so for me, I view it as a great responsibility because 12 years in the role is a long time. I read in the American Lawyer about a lot of my peers who are in these roles stepping down far less than 12 years into the role. And I've read a bunch of articles where other law firm leaders are very candid about the pressures of the role and the travel and all the things that we have to do. And so, I'm constantly focused on making sure that, and I've got a lot to give, because the one thing that we haven't talked about was how important experience has been. When I was 38 and I had very little experience, I was trusting my judgment. Now I've got that same judgment and a ton of experience. And so for me, I think there's, tremendous value, and I'm, going to continue in the role for another term, which, would take me to 16 years, but probably between either that point or another term, I think it would be good for me and good for the firm for somebody else to be ready. Because again, we all become somewhat jaded when we have a role too long. We don't bring fresh thinking into a role. We don't necessarily bring energy into all aspects of our role, whereas somebody who's new inherently does.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of the way I think about it. It's a real challenge, because I think that, I'm blessed, and people think that I'm doing an amazing job, and people tell me all the time, I don't know how you do this. We're so lucky we have you. I can't imagine anybody else doing this but you, which makes me feel great. It's really nice to hear, but it's also not necessarily the place such a big, mature organization, is best to be at. And so it's my responsibility, Chris, and I take that seriously too.
Yeah, thank you. Let's pivot. There's some topics we'd love to get to. Would love to hear your perspective on what do you see in the U.S. legal market. So maybe what you're seeing right now, and then also kind of part two would be is what do you anticipate seeing over the next 5 to 10 years from your perspective?
So I mean, I think that there clearly is a lot of press around and a lot of conversations around the importance of growth. And the appearance of combinations and of varying sizes and scope, and so I understand why the industry is consolidating right now, and why there is pressure to consolidate. The ability to continue to do sophisticated work and command the types of fees that large law firms are charging is at least somewhat correlated to having deep benches of lawyers and having specialties and subspecialties, and it takes a lot of people and it takes a lot of work in order to keep subspecialists fully engaged and up to speed. And so, there certainly seems to be a recognition that law firms need to get bigger. For us, we've gotten more focused. We haven't gotten that much bigger. We like very much what we have here. We like very much the ability to know pretty much for me to know all the partners, and for partners to know the other partners who they may have an opportunity to bring into a matter, to be brought into a matter with, and that's very comfortable. But we certainly saw, like, back in the during the middle stages of the pandemic, that war for talent was something that frankly was hard for law firms like mine. And so that memory, I think, causes us to recognize that there are a lot of benefits of getting bigger, but you certainly want to maintain what makes you special and what differentiates you. So that's, in terms of like where we are today and the trends that are going on today, that's what I see. If you'd like, I'll pivot to the longer term, because I think it's also related. Yeah,
Yep.
the longer term is clearly an increasing reliance on tools that will allow us to become more efficient, right? AI, technology, different processes, different ways of staffing, all of those models, I think, are going to really change the way we practice. So I'm confident of that. The thing I'm not 100% sure about is the timing, because I think we always hear about these the hype curve, I think is what it's referred to as, and I think that we're like kind of, at least in the part of the hype curve where you go over the top of initial hype and now you're waiting for the hype to take hold. But I think that there's no doubt that AI and other technology is going to really enhance the way we can practice.
And Noah, what's the one thing that really keeps you up at night, that you're really kind of, it occupies your downtime about? Like, what's the one, if there's one burning issue, what is it?
I have different answers for that question depending on where we are. The thing that probably is the scariest thing that could happen at any time is cybersecurity, and the need to be ready for the possibility that our data could be taken, our systems could be compromised. Because it's, for a law firm, there's downtime, which is revenue, and then there's reputation, right? Clients want to be able to trust their law firms, and I think that, notwithstanding that nobody can proof themselves from cyber attacks with 100% accuracy, I think it in some way shakes clients' confidence in your abilities, and so cybersecurity and staying ahead of the threats is something that is just a constant effort and needs constant investment.
Noah, would love your opinion on what is quietly taking place in the United States with law firms taking private equity. It's been like a rash within CPA firms. Private equity is looking for the next place to put their money. It's happening in Europe. There's roll-ups taking place. There's publicly traded law firms there. Would love to just hear your candid thoughts around that.
So, the thing that I'll say before we even get to the private equity taking investment piece is, it's always been fascinating to me that, so my skill in running the law firm, we talked about it. It's relationships, it's understanding people, it's connection, it's everything else. We didn't talk for 1 second about my training in running such a large business, or my, and I don't have a business degree, and I think few people who sit in a chair like mine do have a business degree. And so I think that there is a real benefit to being influenced by sophisticated people who manage businesses, specifically professional services businesses. And so I think that there really is a potential benefit to the way, accelerating our ability to change and continuing to navigate the firm with a business perspective would benefit us all, right? I think that historically, law firm partners don't want to hear no, or don't want to be told what to do by anybody who isn't one of them, and by anybody who hasn't practiced previously. And so that's kind of a little bit of a balance. And I think that private equity as a potential investor in law firms is it certainly is fascinating. I think that at least in terms of my understanding of the way these structures work, it makes more sense probably for equity partners in a law firm who don't have a long timeline than those who do, because you're effectively trading future income streams for an investment today, right? And banking on the fact that you can take that investment today as an individual and turn that into more money than just the periodic payments that you would have gotten. And so that part of it, I think, is a little bit challenging for law firm partners to wrap their head around. And I think that probably there's different incentive at different levels of seniority and receptiveness to that. One analogous area, because I'm aware of the accounting firm consolidation and investment in private equity, but also we see that happening to some degree with physicians' practices. Yep. And I think the physicians' practices who tend to be the ones who look for investment more are the ones where there's a senior level of doctors who control the practice and who are looking to wind up monetizing what they've wound up building. And I think that within a law firm where we have so many partners with so much variation, that's a challenge. But I definitely think that running law firms like businesses is a trend that's been going on for quite some time. I think that it's getting more and more important when we talk about AI, changes in the environment and everything else. And what better way to wind up really thinking about your firm as a business than having a business partner?
Yeah, very good. Noah, how can people find you, contact you, follow you on social media?
So I have a very active and vibrant presence on LinkedIn, and I would welcome anyone who's listening to follow me on LinkedIn.
Very good. Noah, thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Truly my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.